The morning began with a cacophony that had no volume. Arthur stood in the middle of the subway station, hands pressed hard against his ears, but the noise was inside his skull. It arrived in waves. A commuter to his left plotted the theft of documents hidden in a locker. A woman across the platform replayed a lie she had told her employer. Every secret desire and mundane grocery list pressed against his mind like a physical weight. He pushed through the turnstile, eyes locked on the concrete floor, avoiding the faces of those who did not know they were exposing themselves. He reached his office desk, already drenched in sweat. He opened his laptop, trying to force his focus onto spreadsheets, but the hum of his colleagues' unfiltered minds grew sharper. It was not just noise, it was an invasion. His manager walked by, his footsteps heavy on the carpet. The man was not thinking about the quarterly reports. He was thinking about firing Arthur, calculating the easiest way to end his employment. Arthur did not look up, but the intent hit him like a physical blow. The room shifted, the air turned stale. He realized he could no longer keep the walls up. Arthur stood up. He walked past the rows of desks and straight into the manager's private office. He did not speak. He simply placed a folder on the polished wood surface. Inside were the printed records of the very crimes the manager had concealed in his home office. The man looked at the pages, then at Arthur, and his face drained of color. His internal monologue, previously a loud, arrogant stream of plans, snapped into a singular, terrified silence. Arthur left the office without a word. By noon, the office dynamic had shattered. He walked out onto the street, but the city had changed. Or perhaps he had. As he passed pedestrians, they stopped mid-stride. He caught their eyes, and they recoiled, as if his gaze stripped away their defenses. He ducked into a restaurant to escape the sun, but the chef behind the counter dropped a heavy iron knife. The clang echoed against the tile floor. The chef stared at Arthur, his mind screaming with the sharp, jagged memory of a crime committed years ago. Arthur felt the recoil in the room. He was no longer just an analyst. He was a mirror that forced the world to look at its own fractures. He turned and stepped back into the heat of the sidewalk, knowing he was now a threat to everyone he passed. Arthur turned away from the crowd, his boots striking the pavement with rhythmic intent. He needed silence. He found the city library, a limestone fortress standing against the roar of the streets. He pushed the heavy glass doors open and stepped into the dim, cool air. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light. He moved to the deepest corner, sliding into a chair between shelves that towered toward the ceiling. He closed his eyes, waiting for the piece of dead paper and ink to drown out the living, but the silence never came. It was infected. 3 aisles away, the librarian moved a cart of books, her mind a sharp, jagged loop of petty jealousy. She was tallying the hours until her shift ended, resenting a colleague for a recent promotion, her thoughts blooming in Arthur's head like ink in water. He gripped the edge of the wooden table until his knuckles turned white. He had sought a sanctuary, but he had only walked into a smaller, more intimate cage. He realized then that he was not just hearing the world, he was trapped inside it. Every person was a locked room, and he was the only one forced to walk the halls. There was no perimeter, there was no solitude. He stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the floor, and looked at the rows of books that offered him no refuge from the unrelenting noise of humanity. Arthur walked to the center of the city square. Thousands of people moved around him, a river of hidden desires and muffled secrets. He stood on a stone plinth, feet planted, and ignored the urge to flee. He opened his mind, not to listen, but to broadcast. He gathered the crushing weight of his own exhaustion, the sharp edges of his fear, and the relentless noise he had absorbed all day. He pushed it outward, a tidal wave of raw, unfiltered, human truth. The effect was immediate. The roar of the square died. A businessman standing 10 feet away stumbled, dropping his briefcase as he clutched his head. A mother let go of her child's hand, her eyes glazing over, paralyzed by the sudden, deafening echo of her own suppressed anxieties. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of thousands of silent, internal confessions. People stopped walking. They stood like statues, staring at nothing, caught in the sudden, suffocating quiet of their own minds. Arthur stood in the eye of the storm. He had stopped the city by forcing it to listen to itself. The square was now a tomb of secrets, and for the first time, he was the only one who could breathe. Arthur did not look back at the statuesque crowd. He walked through the frozen square, his footsteps the only sound against the sudden, hollow stillness. He reached the train station, a place usually teeming with frantic, overlapping intentions. Now, it was muted. He stepped onto the platform, boarded the final carriage, and found a seat by the window. As the train pulled away, the city began to blur into a smear of gray concrete and steel. With every mile, the pressure inside his skull began to subside. The jagged edges of other people's secrets softened, then drifted away like smoke caught in a crosswind. He leaned his forehead against the glass. The train climbed higher, winding through tunnels and cutting into the spine of the mountains. The air outside turned crisp and thin. When the train finally slowed to a stop at the edge of the timberline, the only thing Arthur heard was the wind moving through the pines and the steady, rhythmic beat of his own heart. He stepped off the carriage onto the gravel path. No voices, no hidden agendas, no echoes. He walked into the tree line, a man finally alone with the sound of his own thoughts, breathing in the vast, empty silence of the peaks.